It's Friday, Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. Hello, everybody. Full disclosure, I'm not feeling too well today. But look, better lighting. Yay. Finally got that problem fixed. And Momo's on the Lady Bits chair that he loves a lot. This is like Momo's favorite thing now. But I sat down to do Feedback Friday, and it's like, oh, it's the holidays. There probably aren't that many comments. Whoa! Okay, I was wrong. You guys are on it. And of course, before I forget, help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/Leanna K. If you are mad at Patreon or just want to do a single time donation, there is an email address you can use with PayPal. I should put a direct link. I'm still figuring out how to do it the first time I did it wrong. So PayPal is an option as well. If you don't like Patreon, support in any way is greatly appreciated. The comments were kind of interesting. I want to start with my sort of year in review video, the thing about 2018, the year of reactions, or the year of the reaction. And some people made some comments, and I'm just want to provide some nuance here. I'm not slamming them or disagreeing with them or anything like that. The idea that tech leans heavily progressive, and this causes a lot of the issues. The gamers are more diverse than tech. Yeah, that objectively is true, that gamers are a much more diverse group than people who make tech. That's true of people who see movies as opposed to who make movies, and who watch movies, watch TV as opposed to make TV. All these entertainment industries are usually more white and male than the people who consume them. Now, the question of liberalism in tech is a really interesting one, because it depends how you define liberalism. Tech is heavily capitalist, like vicious venture capitalist. And there is absolutely no will within tech to do it any other way. So if you're talking in terms of economic models, in terms of like laissez-faire capitalism versus say, socialism, tech is not left at all. It's not even laissez-faire capitalism. Venture capitalists pick winners. It's almost like the old school patrons of the arts. You have to convince a very small group of people to fund your stuff. On the other subject, I clash a lot with tech people because they come from a school of white liberalism that I didn't, because I grew up in a minority majority neighborhood, meaning there were more people of color than white people. I hate that term, but I grew up with a really different view of progressive politics. And there is a nasty bias in tech just because they're horrendous echo chambers. It's not just about being liberal. It's engineer thinking. It's a kind of coastal liberalism as opposed to, the liberalism you'd find in a place like New York or Chicago or Atlanta, or even a place like Vermont. You can't just say tech is progressive, because in a lot of ways it's not. They have no real interest. They talk a big game, but they have no real interest in actually hiring based on merit and not based on pedigree. And someone would say, what's the difference? Well, they only hire from certain schools. It feels like sort of the Suits thing, because it's so competitive, and they only take 5% of applications. Don't hold me to that number. It gets very myopic. It's the same types of people with the same backgrounds, with the same ideas. And I'm not just talking about color. I'm not just talking about background. I'm not just talking about gender. I'm talking about even the people who are, people of color or are women. They're expected to conform to this rigid way of thinking so that you're part of the culture that really does limit their ability to see the world like everybody else does. And I think we kind of saw that with Facebook and Google and Twitter and all this stuff. Even the Patreon debacle, these companies really show a lack of connection to how regular people think. Someone in the Bay Area just does not have the same problems as the vast majority of the company. So it's not just about progressivism. It's not just about liberalism. It's that particularly white, affluent Bay Area liberalism that in many, many ways is not liberal at all. In many ways, it is very authoritarian. I won't say totalitarian. I won't use I always use the F word. I won't say fascist, but it's very controlled. It's very top down. It's very, everybody must agree. And that's not progressive politics. The idea of progressive politics is to let in people with other opinions. That's the whole point of it. It's not everybody thinks the same. So I wanted to just sort of clarify there that I sort of agree, but I wanted to add something. Moving on to the projections for 2019, a little aside comment again brought in a huge deluge of comments about games price. I am not advocating to increase the price of games. I think I even said, I know I have in previous videos, that part of the reason they're into all these stupid loot boxes and microtransactions and in-app purchases and all this stuff is because there is no tolerance for a price increase. All I was saying was that I feel it is more honest. If you need to raise your price, raise your price. Don't basically install a form of gambling in your game and put in stuff that actually lures people into spending more money than they intend to. Now, I don't use microtransactions ever. I used to put in, okay, Pet Rescue Saga. I've played like 596 levels. Here's 99 cents. I don't care. I've stopped doing that because I saw some of the things that they were doing with these microtransactions, and they are just crooked. I don't believe that video games themselves are gambling. I disagree with that. I do agree that the way some loot boxes are designed, not microtransactions, not where you just pay money to buy something, but these gacha games, gacha as in the Japanese term, there is an element of gambling to it, and the jury's out on what that does, whether that is in fact addictive. I don't believe that video games themselves are addictive. I believe that people who are video game addicts practice a form of avoidant behavior. But gambling, we know gambling addiction is a thing. It's the dopamine rush. It's the adrenaline rush. It's the thrill that people get kind of hooked on. And I'm waiting to see what the science ends up being on that. It's too early to tell for sure, but but it is certainly more compelling than anything about video game violence or sexism or anything. Oh, that's nonsense. So all I was saying was that if they do need more sources of revenue to make these big games, fine, raise the price. I don't care. Personally, I think that they are not spending money wisely. I think that many, many games have shown that you don't need absolutely top-notch graphics. I think, and I mean, some games, yes, but I mean, a shining example of that is the Grand Theft Auto franchise. It's always had that sort of cartoony painted look so that it can look... It's a standard look across, the top of the line PC to sort of the older generation consoles that those games tend to be put out on. They've found a way to find a graphic style that actually doesn't look like junk, even when you have to downscale the graphics. That's ingenuity. That works well. Other games like, Super Meat Boy, Minecraft, even Fortnite isn't, people get mad at me for this, but it isn't the greatest graphics. It has a very distinct, it's heavily stylized, which again allows it to downscale and not look like junk. And that's good design and good for them. And the games that tend to take off tend to be playable with, moderate to low specs, because that means more people can actually play them. But we have to have discussions about this stuff because the costs are just out of control on these games. And some of it is definitely poor workflow management, poor pipeline management. They fart around too much in the design stages. These games take too long to get out the door, and it just ends up costing more money. But that is a discussion definitely for another time. The last video on Louis C.K., I know this one was going to be a bit of a shit pile in the comments. A lot of people did misunderstand what I was saying and ignored all the freaking caveats about offensive comedy is perfectly fine. It's not going anywhere. I fully support it. Here's why I think so many people are upset. People just, I guess they're Louis C.K. fans and they freaked out. Again, huge emotional response. Wasn't really responding to what I was saying. Some people who heard the complete set, not just the snippet, but the complete set, did contextualize it by saying it was a very small club, which indicates he's working on material. Yes, absolutely true. I still maintain that comedians have to recognize that you are always being watched. It's the person of interest paradigm. You are being watched. There is no such thing as a small club anymore because, as I said in the video, all it takes is one person with a camera phone and you're screwed. And I don't agree with this. I don't think it's right, but this is just the reality of the situation. And you know what? I wouldn't be surprised if there are plenty of comics who have made Parkland jokes and didn't get in trouble because they didn't have the recent pattern of bad behavior that Louis C.K. did. Like, I don't know why this is so hard for some people to grasp. And then there was a lot of hate for the Parkland students and this resentment that they're becoming activists and that they act like this is the first time there was a school shooting or some kids got killed by gun violence. And I have to sit back and kind of chuckle at that because that's the reality of youth activism. Every youth activist acts like what happened to them was the worst thing in the world and nothing like that had ever happened before. It's a unique tragedy. Because they're too young to have any context. That is just, anybody who works with youth sees that time and time and time again. It becomes kind of adorable. And I don't think that people should be dismissed from public participation just because they're young and don't have a sense of perspective. I thoroughly disagree with that whole idea that they don't have the whole story, therefore they shouldn't engage. Why is anyone resentful that youths want to become activists? That's part of youth. I think it should be. I think part of that experience of learning who you are and learning what you believe and establishing yourself as a soon-to-be adult, that's part of it. I think that's way healthier than doing drugs or driving recklessly or drinking too much. I don't have a problem with people having a flawed view getting involved because, let's face it, everybody's view is flawed to one extent or another. I do not get the hostility towards these teenagers. Now, the concern that they are being manipulated by very, very smart professional political activists, that that I think is a much more valid concern, because I have seen a lot of people with these very deeply personal stories get co-opted by various political groups, and they don't end up in a good place. They don't end up well. They don't go on to live happy, healthy lives. The one that broke my heart was Cindy Sheehan, who went from this very simple narrative of, I think she was waiting outside the Bush ranch for president. I think it was W. Bush. I lose track of the numbers, guys. Sorry, 43, Bush 43. But she was just wanted to talk to him about the death of her son. That's how it started. It was simple. It was poignant. Everybody could understand a mother's loss. She then got co-opted by certain groups that weren't just anti-stupid wars. They were anti the entire concept of war, the entire concept of the military. And she went from being a figure that a lot of people could empathize with to being one of those like Women's March organizer style foaming at the mouth activists. And it didn't end well. I do think first and foremost, people should be really watching these kids and keeping an eye on their mental health, for the exact same reason I oppose what Louis C.K. did with these jokes. They are teenagers. They are vulnerable. Some of them are old enough to vote now, but that doesn't mean they're adults. 18 is not an adult. I'm sorry, it's not, especially not in the complicated age we live in. These kids are still extremely vulnerable, and I don't think people should be making jokes about flinging a fat kid in the line of fire, and I don't think they should be co-opting them for political purposes. I really disagree with the argument that he wasn't making fun of the Parkland kids. He was making fun of people who think that the Parkland kids are now an authority on gun violence. I disagree, because he wasn't examining just the phenomenon of the incredible public interest in these kids. He made up a scenario where they got a kid killed because they were overweight. And I think that's cruel on so many levels. I don't like this. I want to be careful how I put this, because I know there are really sensitivities either way here. Being obese is a health problem. Obese people have enough to worry about without the world also thinking they're stupid and slovenly and disposable somehow. I don't like any type of thinking that treats anyone as somehow disposable. And that includes the Killough Men hashtag. That includes, anything like that. I don't think it's right. It's legal. People absolutely have the right to say it. I disagree with it. I know firsthand how awful people are to you because they think you're fat. I spent a childhood where I was one of those kids that grew out before I grew up. So I gained a bunch of weight and then I grew. It was weird. Didn't change how I was eating. I was dancing competitively. I got tons of exercise. They were weighing us and making us keep food diaries. I was starving myself. I have never been below a size 6 in my life when I was profoundly underweight. And then I got into media where if you're over a size 2, somebody calls you fat. I know how it's not just a mean word. It's a mean word that actually inhibits people. It actually is something that it's harder to obtain work. They've actually found that overweight people, when they go to a job interview, no matter how put together they are, they're seen as less qualified, less competent. That's not right, especially since a lot of obesity is tied to, first of all, genetics. Second of all, socioeconomic issues. This whole idea of food deserts in the US, where people actually don't have access to, nutritious food that isn't full of trans fats and hidden calories. So while I absolutely agree with the people who say that we shouldn't be treating morbid obesity as a perfectly acceptable state because it's unhealthy, I also believe that people need to feel like they matter to do something as hard as lose weight when you're genetically predisposed to being heavier. It's hard. Dieting is hard. As somebody who did it for a really, really long time and then finally decided, no, screw this. I'd rather not be on television than have to be that damn skinny. It makes you miserable. It affects your ability to think. You have headaches. You're tired. Until your body adjusts. And I don't think dieting's the right way to go about it anyway. I think healthy eating habits are much more the way to go. Small changes that you can actually stick to. And I just don't think making fun of someone for physical characteristics like that is okay. I know a lot of people who are overweight or who have been overweight, and they're very brave and they put up a good front, but I see that those comments hurt them. And it doesn't hurt them in the way of, I need to make a change. It just hurts them. It makes them feel less motivated. It makes them feel less empowered to do anything about it. And that part of the joke alone, come on, you're better than that. Like, it's not even funny. It's not even funny, the idea that somebody would throw someone else in harm's way to escape a shooter. It's just not funny. And these people who think, oh, no, it's hilarious, you're wrong. Comedy's subjective. You have the right to think that. I don't think it's funny. Cool. All right. Okay, so as I told the patrons, I went into more detail about this. I am going to do a few videos on concepts related to free speech, a bit of the history related to free speech. I'm trying to get my brain back in analytical mode after this absolutely hellish move. And so I'm going to use this as an exercise. It's only going to be maybe 3 videos, possibly 4. I'm going to try to do at least 1 next week. It'll depend on how much my brain kicks in. But I explained to the patrons kind of my thinking behind it. That special Patreon content. So if you want that, become a patron. I admit that some of the reason I became interested in this and started looking into it was because of the whole Patreon shitstorm and the extremely divergent views that came about as a result of everybody losing their minds over that. And it really got me interested because I started to say, okay, well that opinion has, I see reason there, and but that one and then that one too, and then that one too, and of course they opposed each other in pretty major areas, but I thought they all sort of had merit in their own way. It's a really complicated issue, so that sort of is what inspired it. So that's coming up. Thanks for watching. Have a really great weekend. It's supposed to warm up again here. If it's not warming up where you are, stay warm. If it's, summer where you are, don't get heat exhaustion. Okay, thanks for watching.